How's it going there, Facebook pals? So Joel and I were talking today a little bit about training. We're actually putting on some tests this week. We do that roughly every 90 days. Now, everybody's not testing every 90 days, but we try to do some block of testing about every 3 months or so, just to do an assessment. Joel, let's give some background. Approximately how long have you personally been doing martial arts?
Sure. So I started when I was 11, and I'm 23 now. I earned my black belt in Taekwondo when I was 15, and I started to teach around that time. I ended up earning my third-degree black belt in Taekwondo when I was 19, and since then joined with toe-to-toe and earned my second-degree black belt in kickboxing, and I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. And a lot of that was coming to class, consistently. Even if I couldn't get the technique down or every step of the form back to back, I showed up to class and my instructors were there to, kind of mentor me and uplift me and show me the right steps to take to get to black belt and even push past black belt. That's always been kind of like my goal in martial arts. Everybody wants to earn black belt, but then where do you go after that? And there's a lot of avenues that you can go. You can be an instructor or you can be a fighter. And I remember being 12, 13 and obsessed with UFC. I loved UFC, so I wanted to be like John Jones, the light heavyweight champ. So that was like my goal when I was 14 or 15. And it's not to say that that's completely out of the picture, but I started to teach around that time and realized that my is also a gift, that I wanted to share. So since then, I've just been kind of honing that craft, and martial arts has been a wonderful blessing in my life, and I'm able to share it with other people, with my family and my friends, and I get to see people grow like I did whenever I started to take martial arts, and it's definitely impacted my life a lot, and I attribute that a lot to support from my family, but also having that goal of, okay, well, I want to be the best martial artist I can be, and that's different for everybody else. You may want to be a fighter, or you may want to be an instructor. There's different paths you can take regarding, your martial arts journey. And just for me, I worked out becoming an instructor, and I've loved it ever since. I'm good at it, and people tell me I'm good at it, and so I just continue along with the ride and just see where it takes me. And I'm pretty much never going to stop doing martial arts. It's in my life. It's in my blood. And if you don't know that about me, well, then you don't know Joel Fountain. So,
So that's such a great, guys out there in Facebook world, that is such a great real world experience that I think a lot of martial artists have had. I started training, I think I was about 11 or 12 years old. So you're 5 years old in kindergarten, and by the time you're in 6th grade, you're probably 11, 12. And I remember I was in 6th grade when I started training. Started off in karate and did karate. I did kempo. I did old school jiu-jitsu back then. This is the old, what we call Wally J or small circle jiu-jitsu kind of stuff. Touched on a lot of other things. Did some Filipino stick and knife fighting. Kali. I trained a lot of different things. But the bottom line is I came consistently. That's the first thing that Joel was talking about, really, was let's be consistent.
mm-hmm.
All right. Now, Joel, do we have haters out there in this world?
Of course. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're good at it and you put yourself out there, then you kind of have to expect people to have opinions.
So I'm betting there will be somebody that watches this video and they're like, oh, well, that's some bull crap, Who can get a black belt? Who can really do anything in about 4 to 5 years? Well, I think that's a legitimate question. For those of you that didn't know, you can be a law enforcement officer with about 14 weeks of training. You can be a military member, a soldier, with 8 weeks of basic training and 8 weeks of advanced individual training, and then go to combat. I actually have been that guy that I did basic training, I did AIT, I went to jump school, and then within a year of graduating, I was in combat doing my thing. Now again, I wasn't an instructor, but I was doing it. I was doing the deal. Let's look at some other things. Any idea about how long it takes a person to be a qualified firefighter?
I'd say at least 6 months.
Okay. I got to be honest with you guys, all my firefighter pals out there, I'd like you to put in about how long it took you to be good enough to be a firefighter. Now, you might not have been the fire chief, but you were a firefighter. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about maybe an English teacher or a history professor. So is it possible for those out there, any of my teacher friends out there, for you to take 4 years of college? Now, let's assume we're all on the same basis from GED level and high school graduate level. You know, we've got that background. But somebody decides to go to college and you do 4 years in college and you get a degree, a bachelor's degree. And then you get a teaching certificate. It's about 4 years. Let's maybe say you took your time and maybe it was 5 years. 5 years is a significant amount of time.
Sure.
So I want to bring this up because I really believe that much in the same way that we teach school, roughly every 6 weeks to 9 weeks, we finish up a semester and we kind of have done something and we kind of want to show some progress. Mm-hmm. There are ways that we can test information. Joel, what's one way that you know is a really, really good way to say a student can do, let's just say 4 basic punches and 4 basic kicks? What is one way that you like to say, I bet this kid's ready to test? How would you know?
Well, seeing as we are a self-defense based school, we want to run through examples of that you might have to use your self-defense. So as an instructor, and I can speak for myself and probably for Curtis, we hope that you never have to use your self-defense tools that you use. However, we want you to be comfortable and secure and confident, ready to do whatever it takes so that way you can defend yourself and your family. So after class, at the end of every class, we fight, and from there I'm able to assess, like, okay, do they know their punches? Do they know their blocks? Do they know their kicks? And for the most part, people can fight. I like to see if they can throw that one punch, then great. Keep throwing that one punch. And if you can throw that one kick, all right, well, do it the very best that you can. And like I was saying earlier, everybody's got their own journey in martial arts. For me, I was able to kick. Kicking was my savvy, kind of trait. But punching, it took me a little while to get the hang of my boxing technique, and it just took me drilling over and over again, and of course doing that time by myself, but having somebody to say, hey, make sure you keep your hand up and make sure you turn your hip whenever you go to punch. And I would have never figured that out unless I had an instructor, somebody to show me the ropes and to show me along those lines. So and you can punch Bob and you punch the air all day, but until you start punching somebody or something that can move and keep their hands up, that's when you actually start to, okay, oh crap, like it's time to fight, and for me, since I've been doing, Taekwondo competition and some jiu-jitsu competition here and there, I'd say that's kind of prepared me and allowed me to keep a calm mindset whenever I'm fighting, to kind of make decisions, split-second decisions, and also keep my energy levels, available. I'm not completely out of breath. I could easily fight, 10, well, not say it easily, but fight 10 people back to back to back without getting, dead tired. And it's just from experience, and even if you are super physically fit, which is one of the requirements that, we find in testing, you need to be able to do a set amount of jumping jacks, push-ups, ab exercise, and squats. You need to be able to portray those, because in self-defense, you have to be strong. Technique is important, but you've said it in class, we've said it in class before, size matters, so we want the technique to be at the forefront, but unless you can physically, explode and be, decisive about those, then the bigger guy, has the advantage. And that's what I love about martial arts is you come here, we create a safe environment so that way you can learn, and safe enough to where you can push yourself to know your limits. And that's a huge part of self-defense, is figuring out, okay, well, this is how many punches I can throw with, this is how many kicks I can do. This is about, maybe last like a minute and a half, right, if you're a beginner. So if you don't subject yourself to these kind of things, you'll never know. You'll never have that kind of the background of like, okay, I know that I can last this long. And street fights typically, what would you say, 30 seconds at the most?
I think the general feeling around the martial arts community is a street fight lasts 30 seconds to a minute. you rarely see protracted combat that goes on and on and on. Sometimes you do. Some of these Walmart fights that we typically see, somebody's not happy, those are 30-second deals, and it's over. Yeah. But let's get back to, you said some really neat things. You said a lot of things, really. When I said, what's one good way, the first thing you said is you observe how they fight. Mm-hmm. Joel, if somebody comes into the school and they've never had any training, but maybe they fought a lot in their life, street fights, maybe they wrestled around with their brothers or sisters or something of that nature, mm-hmm. And they have a skill or a capability that maybe we didn't teach them. Could you see that, particularly if you compare it to somebody with no experience, no skill that walked in on the first day, would you say that those two people are probably different?
Absolutely. My dad would say there's no substitute for experience, and I bring up my dad because he lived in England. He grew up in England, and the drinking age there is a lot younger than what it is in the U.S. So, you'd go to pubs, and back in those days, sometimes you'd be looking for a fight, and before he ever did karate or any kind of martial arts, he had been in street fights whether he liked it or not, and that's just kind of how it was in those days. So, thankfully, I grew up in the U.S. and I had bullies from time to time, but I never had to street fight to save my life, which I'm super grateful for, and I hope that I never have to go through that. But I anticipate being a person who is a martial artist and handsome guy, real confident. There's people who may be jealous, and that may want to prove their point, and I can confidently say that I'm ready. I can defend myself and my family, and I'm ready to do it. Throw it out there if need be.
I think that's good, because the second piece that he's talking about is confidence. So if the first thing is we can observe our students in training, and there is a difference between somebody with no training but they have some experience, and then somebody has no training and no experience. They both walk in on the day one, they're white belt, they're brand new. Whether you're talking karate, taekwondo, kempo, or whether you're talking about Muay Thai kickboxing, which we train here, mm-hmm. as well as jiu-jitsu, particularly the ground, the Brazilian flavored jiu-jitsu, which we teach here. The bottom line is that we all start everybody at white belt, and it's really not. It's not necessarily the same. You get a guy that's really wrestled around a lot, but he's never trained in jiu-jitsu, and he's got some skill, and he comes in here and he starts kind of dominating everybody. And you're like, what are you going to do with that guy? This is where we really start talking about testing. And I said earlier that we test about every 90 days-ish. We start looking, and we remind people we're going to have a test. If you want a test, totally optional. By the way, we're one of the few schools that we don't charge for a test. A test is an opportunity for you to measure where you are, for us to see where you are, and for the most part, if we're good instructors, don't we kind of already know who's going to pass a test and who can't?
Absolutely.
So what does the test do? Let's say Joel is going to be the primary instructor. He's going to run a test, and I'm the guy that's overseeing the old program. So Joel's going to be testing some students today, and I'm there to kind of keep an eye on things. I'm kind of the quality control guy just to make sure that things aren't missed. Joel is looking for something specific. I'm there kind of watching as well. And then together, shouldn't we be able to just promote a guy without a test? Is that even possible? Do some schools do that?
Well, I came in with a 3rd degree black belt in Taekwondo, so that's kind of like my certificate. Like, hey, Frenchie, I put the time in, but I was able to prove with my skills and by fighting that we can translate that same skill to this martial art.
So there is some cross-grading, but let's put cross-grading aside, because that's true. I always honor anybody's skill. If you're a black belt in Kung Fu or karate or something else, wear your rank. You're welcome to wear your rank in my school. I don't make you take off the belt. So what you're saying is absolutely true. But I'm saying, are there instructors in the world that don't conduct a formal test? They just say, he's ready. Couldn't we technically do that if we wanted? Couldn't we just look at him and say, he's ready?
As a professional, absolutely. But we want the students to have confidence, and we want them to know that they put in the time, they put in the effort to actually demonstrate the techniques, and they felt strong doing it. It's not like, oh, well, I hit Bob, but he didn't move. No, I hit Bob, and that freaking fell over, So having them, as an instructor, being able to see the students perform the techniques is huge, but you need to have the students have that self-confidence and that belief, so that way they can actually perform it like an instructor would want them to perform, so.
I totally agree. So guys, here's the thing. Imagine you went to college, or you're in high school, and you learned something for a full semester, whatever the teacher was teaching you. Maybe it was biology, for example. And you took the course, and you read the book, and you never got a test. Well, if the professor is watching your interactions, he sees you doing labs, maybe he has asked you tough questions, or maybe you're the one raising your hand a whole lot, he probably already knows you're going to pass. You can kind of tell. But the test is for you. The test isn't for me, or Joel Fountain, or any other instructor. Now, we pretty much know who's going to pass. And here's how we know. Just like Joel said, we observe. Can they fight? That's the easiest way to tell if somebody's got the capability that they're ready to test.
Yep.
If we were talking about math, for example, can you work the problem on the board? Can you do your homework without questions? And most of you guys have done this in high school and in college, or at least in elementary school. You've done this. You've done the work. You turned in your work. Your teacher, your professor, they kind of know that, well, he can do the math.
Mm-hmm.
Is the test really necessary? Well, guys, I'm going to tell you it's necessary because exactly what Mr. Fountain was saying. We want the student to feel what it's like to be put under such adversity. Mm. We want them to, they're getting punched in the face if they're doing a kickboxing test. Nobody escapes a test without getting hit in the face. You're getting punched, you're getting kicked, that's going to happen. And believe it or not, most of the time we create this opportunity for people to say, I didn't hurt as bad as I thought it was going to hurt. Or, I got hit really hard and it hurt. And I always ask them the next question. Why didn't you quit? Why didn't you just bail out? Why did you keep fighting? Mm-hmm. And we realize that they can take more. Which is to say, number one, we run a safe program. But number two, we put people in real adversity so that they can experience that and grow. Here's the thing. If you don't get hit in school, in the martial arts world, if you don't get hit in the academy, and you go outside, and your kicks are great and your punches are great, you better hope that you win the fight without them ever hitting you.
Yeah.
Once you get hit for that first time, it changes everything. Mike Tyson's famous for saying, everybody's got a plan until you get hit in the face, right? Mm-hmm. All right, let's get back to the point of this video, which is really testing. The test is ultimately pretty subjective, but there's a reason to have a test. We feel like the test is for the student. There are other reasons. Number one, you could have a test to make money. That's a real thing in the martial arts world.
Sure.
You pay a tuition, and then every couple of months, you charge a fee and you make some money so that the student can test. I don't charge a fee because I feel like that's icky. Now, if you do that, you guys do you. Who am I to judge you? I'm saying me. I judge me. I feel icky charging somebody for a test where I am the you passed or didn't pass kind of guy. I want to be impartial. If you involve money, then suddenly I'm tending to want to pass more people and test more people. Let's test more often, right?
Yeah, good point.
All right, so let's kind of scratch our head on that one. Let's slide that to the side. We don't test for the purpose of making money. We don't charge. All right, so if it's not to make money, then why would I waste class time, my time, Joel's time, prepping people for a test and then getting them through a test? Why would you do that? Well, again, we already said it's for the students' experiences, for their growth.
Yes.
But there's another reason, and it's kind of the opposite of this. Sometimes we want people to be excellent on skill, but low on rank. And this is when we're talking about competitions. Now, Joel mentioned earlier, and I'll re-emphasize that we are a self-defense training school. We teach people to fight for real. We want people to be able to defend themselves. Now, does that mean that a guy or a gal that's taken a few tests in our program, they've moved up in rank a couple of times, could suddenly be the next UFC champion? I'm going to say, in most cases, not like no, but heck no.
Yeah, no.
It's just that's just not how I see the test going, and it's not how I see our training. It's not our training focus. But I will say that if you guys are testing And I did karate for many years. I now do nothing but kickboxing and jiu-jitsu unarmed, and I do Filipino stick and knife fighting armed, and of course firearms. That's what I do. It's what I'm best at, and I don't do any competitions at this point. My last competition, I was 40 years old. I'm 51 now. It's been 11 years. All right. I say that because if you're going to go up against someone in a division, there's only two things that you can manipulate to get an advantage, because your skill is non-negotiable. You either have skill or you don't.
Yeah.
So there's only two things you can manipulate, and that's your weight and your rank. So let's say, for example, that I'm 175 pounds. That's where I normally weigh in at, and I want to drop all the way down into the middleweight division. Well, I got to get down about 160-ish pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think 164 is the top of the middleweight category. I think 154 is welterweight, so I think that's about right. I know they also have super middleweights, and they got some other other weight divisions. But let's just keep it at that. Let's say that I am 175 and I want to get down to 164 pounds. I got to wring all the water out of my system, and then I'm going to be tired and feel funky. Then I got to power that water back on within 24 hours of the fight. So if I weigh in the night before at 164, and then the next day I am back up to 175, I have an advantage. Mm-hmm. That's a real thing. You've played a game.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's smart to do that if you want to win. People do that, do it all the time. Wrestlers have done that for, I don't know, hundreds of years, I guess, but at least for decades, as long as I've been alive. Sure. Wrestlers have been cutting weight. Boxers, they have to cut weight. I mean, they do that. It's a thing.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But in self-defense, you don't have time to cut weight. You are at the weight that you are, and if a guy outweighs you by 10 or 20 pounds, you're now relying on speed, power, and ultimately skill. That's really the thing. And, your mind, hopefully. So the other advantage then becomes rank. So generally speaking, there's going to be a beginner division, an intermediate division, an advanced division, and then usually there's some other kind of open division. The open division could be any weight whatsoever. It's a very difficult division, by the way. But let's say that you've been training for 1 year. You're probably still considered a legitimate beginner.
Sure.
Let's say that you've been training for 3 years. Now, depending on what rank that you're wearing, you might still be a white belt after 3 years.
Yep.
Maybe you're a white belt with a couple of stripes, but you haven't made blue belt, for example, in jiu-jitsu. What does that mean? It means that you're still in the beginner division, which means you have a chance to win because you're fighting less experienced people. Now, again, everybody that wants to compete on day one is going to be considered in beginner division. Yep. So let's say that I've been training for 2 months and I'm fighting a guy that's been training for 2 years. If we're the same weight, one of us probably has a lot more time on the mat and probably a lot more experience, and they're probably going to win. Yeah. It's a hard thing to kind of juggle. Does that make sense? So if our focus is, let's not promote people for a while to hold them at that beginner level so they win more, then you start asking yourself, well, why is that so important? Why is winning in competition important? Number one, people like to win. I mean, that makes sense.
Sure.
If somebody loses, they might quit training with you. But the more gold you bring home, the better you feel about yourself, the better you feel about your program, the more students you tend to want to grow, and they stick with you, and they're like, I can't wait to get into the intermediate division and fight in the blue belt category.
Yes.
We don't do that. All right, and here's why we don't do that. Again, self-defense focus. All right, so if that is kind of one of the challenges, then how often should we really be promoting people? Well, it depends on your belt rank system.
Yes.
Joel, do you remember in your early Taekwondo days, approximately what the rank colors were? If you can kind of list those off, just list off as many rank colors as you can think of.
So you started at white, then you can go to yellow, orange, camo, and then they had what's called decided ranks. So every rank after camo, you'd have a black stripe in between, which for the organization I was with at the time, looking back, it's good that they put extra time in between the ranks, but they made you pay for testing,
Sure.
So
sure.
I could see the business aspect of it, but
so you got camo and camo with a stripe.
Camo with a stripe. Then you have green, and then you have blue, then you have purple, and then you have brown. And then and then on top of these you have the in between ranks, so decided ranks. And after brown, you would move on to red belt. In the organization I was in, you would learn, like the pre-black belt form, and that form was kind of preparing you for like the proper kind of ready positions and whatnot. But then there was 3 different levels of red belts. So you'd have red belt, then you'd have red belt decided, and then you'd have red black, then you'd have red black decided, then you'd have black belt decided. So red, you'd have like 5 ranks in between black belt, just as like a safety net. Like, okay, we're double checking, because even around the brown belt stage, you should be thinking about, well, what is it going to take to be black belt? Even in my opinion, even before, if you want to be a great martial artist or a great instructor or a great fighter, you should be thinking about, okay, well, what's the black belt way about going about learning these techniques? And there's a lot of aspects that make a black belt a black belt. It's not just how hard you can punch and how hard you can kick. Of course, those are the physical requirements, But in our modern day, martial arts has changed, and the definition of black belt has changed, in my opinion. Everybody's got a different martial arts journey, but regarding toe-to-toe, we are self-defense based 100%. And we want to make sure that if you test for your rank, you feel like you can actually punch and kick, you can get somebody off of you, and you can defend your family and your friends. That's the main thing. And when I was growing up and I was doing Taekwondo, you got a belt based on if you knew all your moves in your form, you knew some of your weapons form, and you could break a board, and you could score points.
Yeah.